going to stick a knight here. He takes it off. He takes the bishop. So he took it off this bishop. And he's threatening this pawn. I don't think he took this right away, because he played here first. And now he took the bishop.
Bobby Fischer is one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest chess player in the world.
And now he took the rook.
Bobby Fischer, United States, world title contender.
Now Black surprised him with this one.
Bobby Fischer is an isolated man.
Bobby Fischer's a strange man. People think that there's something wrong with the man.
And then the king moves, takes the queen.
The great Bobby Fischer is here tonight.
Like a child, not a champion.
His social life is a vacuum.
The most arrogant man you're ever likely to meet.
He takes back, it gets checked.
Looking for Bobby Fischer.
Whatever happened to Bobby Fischer?
Reclusive. Threatening this pawn, and it's a dead-loss game.
Bobby Fischer is searching for asylum.
It's really Fischer against the world.
And here, White resigned.
Bobby Fischer interview. Right. Try not to tense up. Read. Bobby, you've given virtually your entire life to the world of chess. What about Bobby Fischer, the man? What's he like?
I don't know, it's pretty, chess and me, you know, it's hard to take him apart, you know. Just like my alter ego, you know. I don't really do,
But there are times when you get away from that chessboard. What do you do?
I don't do too much at the most. I'm really, you know, tied up in chess. I intend to expand, but first I gotta get the title. That's basically.
Bobby, what does it take to make a good chess player?
Talent, skill, patience, you have to study a lot and work.
What would your ultimate aim be?
Well, I'd like to be a world champion and keep it for maybe 20 years or so.
20 years.
Fischer is to chess what Muhammad Ali is to boxing.
Would Fischer beat the Russian? Yes, Fischer will beat the Russian.
Do you honestly think that you probably are the world's greatest chess player?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In the 18-month period, in the run-up to his challenge to Boris Spassky, Fischer had beaten, and in some cases destroyed, some of the best Soviet players.
Fischer was wiping away his opposition like flies. He went on a 20-game winning streak, which was unheard of in championship chess.
Bobby Fischer was exciting not only the chess world, but the world.
There's trouble in Northern Ireland. Henry Kissinger is shuttling to and from Vietnam. And against that competition, the chess dominates.
In Moscow today, the Soviet Chess Federation called an angry news conference to denounce Bobby Fischer.
General Motors recalls 500,000 Chevrolet Vegas, and
Bobby Fischer, true to his recent erratic behavior,
Finished off Tigran Petrosyan of the Soviet Union, a former world champion. It was the best news story of the day. The victory gave Fischer the right to play the world's champion, Boris Spassky, another Russian, next spring.
We all had hopes. We all wanted him to be world chess champion.
The one person he was yet to beat was Boris Spassky.
You said it's your title the Russians are holding. You don't like the Russians.
The Russians have cheated at chess. They've tried every way to avoid me, to avoid giving me a chance for a match. And they've slandered my name. And, you know, they're just dead afraid of me. They have been for years. That's the true story.
And now you're going to get them?
Well, now I'm going to try to get them, yeah.
the Soviets had been winning these tournaments, and I thought it would be good for America, for democracy, to have an American winner.
The stakes really couldn't be much higher politically, popularly in people's minds. You know, these were two enemies who were not fighting a real war, but were trying to outdo one another strategically all the time.
We will not tolerate being pushed around.
We have a design and the material assets to deal with the Soviet Union.
Как никогда прочны международные позиции Советского Союза.
This little thing with me and Spassky, instead of, you know, with bombs, having it out over the board.
One of the superpowers, the Soviet Union, had made chess its national sport. They had spent unlimited amount of money. They had hundreds of grandmasters. They won every tournament, every chess Olympiad.
Я кричал: вы что там, обалдели? Что же вы уронили шахматный престиж?
For communist regime, keeping the crown was very important ideologically. This communist state took over chess to use it as proof of intellectual superiority over decadent West. Everybody knew that the crown has to remain in the Soviet Union.
Вы мускулы стальные, пальцы цепкие мои, эх, резные расписные, деревянные ладьи.
In the Soviet Union, everybody of talent was cultivated, was given financial help, coaching. All the top players were privileged people. In the United States, we didn't have any of that. Every single one of us was on his own.
And here came this lone American combating the might of the Soviet chess machine. National prestige was at stake.
Fischer recognized that he was representing not only him, but the entire free world. I think there was just too much on his shoulders.
You tell us how old you are and where you're from.
I'm 15, I'm from Brooklyn.
He is 15 years old and he is from Brooklyn. All right? Will you show your headline to camera 3 and to Dick Clark, because we'll make him go to work on you. It says, teenager strategy defeats all comers.
This strategy, did it involve finances?
No.
Did you have any help?
No.
Did it all by yourself? Did it make people happy?
Made me happy.
This young man's name is Bobby Fischer, and already he is the United States chess champion. He is 15 years old and he has defeated the masters. He is the United States champion in chess.
I met Bobby when I was 14 and he was 8 in one of the chess clubs in Manhattan. He was the youngest kid around. He was unassuming. He was well-mannered. He was a nice kid. His mother, Regina, she was a woman who had to work 2 jobs, single mom, supporting 2 children, Bobby and Joan.
Regina was really the genius of the family. She spoke quite a number of languages, including Russian. She worked as a telegraph operator, a nurse, a welder. She actually got a PhD in hematology as well.
She was an activist. She was a communist. And the FBI files on her are quite extensive.
His mother was hounded by the FBI because they thought she was possibly a Soviet spy. This was a period when Jew and communists were equated. So his mother denied his Jewishness.
His mother told him if he would be sitting on the stoop at 560 Lincoln Place, apartment 4Q, and
somebody would come up to him and ask him a question, he would say, "I have nothing to say to you." That was the proper answer that his mother told him to say.
You're from Brooklyn originally?
Chicago. Well, born in Chicago. Moved to Brooklyn when I was about 6. I lived on the coast.
Were you playing chess by then?
I learned in New York, yeah.
What age?
6.
When did you start to get serious about chess?
Oh, maybe 7.
If you can think back to your childhood and all the things you did after school and on the weekends, and imagine just filling all that in with chess study, chess lessons, chess practice, chess competition.
Sure, Bobby Fischer starts with a very exceptional mind. But genius is not only about a particular innate gift for X. Genius is about a desire to do X. It's about a willingness to sacrifice. It's about an ability to develop that kind of obsessive interest in perfecting one's ability to do some task. People who studied expertise have looked at classical music composers, at surgeons, at chess players, interested in figuring out what do high achievers have in common. They have always, almost without exception, put in 10,000 hours of deliberate practice first.
From very young, he was really living for chess. Even when he was eating, he would always have a chess board with him and study new variations.
That love component is such an enormous part of the achievement of any kind of genius, because if it's dutiful, there's no way you can be that obsessive about it. There was nothing else he would rather do.
I started playing games with myself. I would make the white moves and the black moves, and just go on, play through the whole game, and eventually I would checkmate the other guy. I almost always won.
White comes out with a knight. Now he took the bishop. Brown.
Then my mother started to get worried that you know, it wasn't healthy to be playing chess by myself all the time.
Now black surprised me with this.
Rahbinah was so worried that she decided to take him to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, "Don't worry, there are worse things to be obsessed by than chess."
Everybody said to him, "What happened?" And he said, "One day I just got good." He was suddenly out of everyone else's league, and everybody knew it.
Fischer would open a chess magazine, okay, like this. He would open it like this. He would say, okay, here, let's see, here, okay, here, okay, here. Now, it looks like he's just like looking at the pictures, right? That's what you think he's doing. No, he's not doing it. He's playing through the entire game in his head in a few seconds. Every move.
He went from being my peer in chess to being the United States chess champion. A quantum leap.
That's when he first became famous. This is 1958. No chess player ever made much money in those days. And my father basically arranged an exhibition tour for him in which he went from city to city playing anywhere from 40 to 80 people at a time. And I don't know how much he got then, maybe $5 a board.
Rahbinah decided that this was a way to the big time. She'd call me up and say, "I want Bobby to go on Channel 2 on Sunday, and he won't do it if I ask him, so I want you to tell him." He just wanted to learn the game, and she really wanted him to get publicity.
Fame is definitely a mixed blessing, and almost everybody would admit that at some point in their life they wish they had it. Once it starts, it's fun, and the fun quickly wears off when you want to be alone, private and public, that's ever possible. But also, it's horrendous on the psyche for the young, because it totally distorts their world.
He had all these people around who really wanted a piece of him. If they only wanted to be in his glow. And people have all kinds of motives, not always in his favor. They're trying to make money out of him, they're trying to be associated with him, they're talking behind his back, you know. He couldn't stand any of that. I particularly couldn't stand the press because he was such an individual. He was an ideal object for caricature.
You watch television?
No, not much. Very rarely.
Why?
I don't know. I read that you get little radiation from it. I don't know. I've talked with a few scientist friends of mine. They say you do. It's a fact. You do get a little, but they don't think it's dangerous.
What kind of magazines do you like?
Well, my favorite magazine is Confidential. I read that all the time.
Why do you like that?
It's got a lot of inside stories on things like water pollution. It's pretty interesting. I like read up on that. A lot of things that the government is concealing, you know.
Fischer looked at the world his own way. I mean, Bobby was not socialized the way the rest of us were. Every idea he had virtually had to come through his own thinking.
In these days, he was unusual, but he hadn't gone off the deep end yet.
Boxing champions have been coming to the Catskill Mountains of New York for almost half a century to get in shape. But does a chess champion need to train physically? Take a look behind that window into the training headquarters of Bobby Fischer. Championship chess is a physically exhausting game. More than just a test of mind and will, it is a contest of physical endurance too. Bobby is 29, and he lives virtually a monastic life. He lives alone, always in hotel rooms that seem barely larger than chessboards. A lot of the time, he won't even answer his telephone. The television set is his window on the world. Exercise is part of it.
I'm a world-class Olympic-level coach. I'm also a world champion in the bench press, and I've trained a lot of celebrities, but no one can match the fabulous Bobby Fischer. He was interested in the human body, how it performed, and how it could be more productive. He said, I want you to work on my grip. See this dynamometer? I want to squeeze this thing all the way to the end. I said, the world's strongest man has not squeezed 100 kilograms. He said, I'll squeeze 105. I said, why? When I shake that little Russian's hand, I want him to feel it. I started him off with a little swimming, racquetball, which we were quite good at, a little weight training. And I said, repeat this after me. I'm a winner. I'm a champion. I'm not a loser. And he says, why'd you put the loser thing in there? You know I'm a champion.
Bobby is probably the most interesting person I've ever photographed. There he is, there's Bobby. And he said to hold my breath like this, and it's, you know, it was good for his training. He was in training for Spassky. He asked me, what other jobs do I do? I told him I've just finished one on the New York Jets. Jets? They thought that was marvelous. They thought he wanted to hear all about it, how they train. And he said, you know, I've got to train like that as well. And he didn't mind anything I did. But it could have gone either way. He treated everybody else quite awful.
Bobby Fischer is a stubborn young man. Sometimes he fights for principle, more often just for himself. He'll refuse to play a match because his special terms aren't met. And for the past month, He's been giving fits to the International Federation, too. Not enough money for the winner of the world title, he says.
There was bidding on the match, and Iceland got it, I guess because they put up the highest bid. And Bobby didn't want to play. They said the country's too small. They don't have the facilities, they don't have communication.
The International Chess Federation wants word by tomorrow morning from Fischer on whether he's agreeable to 24 games in Iceland, and Fischer is taking his time answering.
You, as president of the Icelandic Chess Federation, are there times where you have been tempted to say, let's forget all about it?
As you know, we are organizing a chess match, and our only wish is to enrich the chess world.
They had all these lawyers, and they were raising demands all the time. But at the same time, it was never clear whether Fischer would come to Iceland.
Some of the principal one was the prize money.
And I said, we have already settled the money question, and we will not be ready to discuss that.
There was a real possibility that the match wouldn't take place. One has to remember with Fischer that he dropped out of tournaments before. This was no bluff necessarily.
He's going, he's not going. And then he told me he was going. He more quietly put his hand on my shoulders and says, I'm going to Iceland, Harry. You know, it was... So, and the next thing I would read in the paper would be, he's not going.
Just the insanity of the situation. I mean, get that contract done. But Bobby wouldn't sign it. And then Bobby disappeared.
Boris Spassky, the world chess champion, came to Iceland 12 days before the match scheduled to start Sunday. Spassky said he wanted time to get used to the place, without, incidentally, being constantly molested by newsmen. Bobby Fischer was also sensitive about being photographed, sensitive to the point that he kept not showing up.
He was sitting in Pasadena, California, and my job, my personal mission, was to get Bobby to go to Iceland and play the World Championship match. But I didn't see any activity. I didn't see any plane ticket. I said, Bobby, I have to go to New York. My dad is sick. Let's travel together. You'll be that much closer to Iceland. He said, yeah, I think that's a good idea, travel with a friend. Yeah, okay. I was getting him closer to where he had to go. We took him to Kennedy Airport. We were headed for the Icelandic Airlines counter. Somehow, a Daily News photographer spied him, and Bobby started running. He wasn't just running, he was sprinting. I turned around, and I stopped, and I put my hands up. I didn't say anything. And Bobby kept running right out of the airport to the curbside limousine and got in and left the airport. Where to? Nobody knew. It was only 3 days before the scheduled start of the match. Chess history was in the balance. I said, you could stay at my parents' home in Douglaston, Long Island.
Don't think the bell works. It works.
Can I ask what you're here for?
Hi, where are you?
Why are you in our driveway? Is there some reason why you want to be in our driveway?
Oh, I guess you know what
You know, you people spoiled everything Thursday night. Did. I suggest you don't repeat it, because it's going to be a very great tragedy if you do.
Bobby was staying at Sadie's house, And Sadie's father was dying of cancer at the time. I don't know whether he told you that. And they were trying their best to get Fischer on that plane to Iceland. At one point, Sadie said, you know, my father's dying. And Bobby says, that's okay, I don't mind. You know, they could not dislodge him from that house.
This was probably the most stressful week of my life.
Are you Dr. Sadie?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Fischer made it clear that he would try to go to Iceland tonight. Did he express these thoughts to you?
Made it clear to whom?
We had talked to a few people, and they had the impression he was going.
Everybody can have impressions, but the only person who knows what Bobby Fischer is going to do is Bobby Fischer. That's about all I really want to say.
I see.
I want you to all keep cool. At one point during his stay at our home, he simply said, it's over. I'm not going.
Still no sign of Bobby Fischer. Today, the International Chess Federation postponed by 48 hours the start of the match, but it said if Fischer is not in Iceland by noon on Tuesday, he will be disqualified.
Mr. Johnson, if I may ask, are you worried?
No.
And I just wondered if you've ever seen Mr. Fischer, if you have any proof that he actually exists.
That's a good question. Yes, I think, gentlemen, we can agree on the point that Mr. Fischer exists.
We were losing the whole thing. We had to get Fischer to come to Iceland. The Soviet Union had the feeling that the world chess champion was humiliated. They wanted to call Spassky back to the Soviet Union. Boris said to me, this is a very severe situation. You have to solve this on a higher level.
Guðmundur Þórarinsson, I think he asked the Prime Minister of Iceland to call Kissinger.
Fischer was very reluctant to go, and I placed a call to him, and I said to him, go.
The United States of America wanted Bobby to go there and win the world title. By that time, James Slater, the British multimillionaire, had already doubled the purse. So Fischer's answer to Kissinger was, yes, I've decided to play.
What finally did make you decide to go then?
I feel that the prestige of this country is at stake.
Some people have suggested this was psychological warfare against Spassky on your part. Did that figure into it?
No, I don't believe in psychology. I believe in good moves.
Bobby Fischer left New York for Iceland. And what a scene that was in the morning of July the 4th.
Nothing like this has ever happened in Iceland before. You try to describe the impact on the citizens here of Reykjavik. It's probably about the same as if the promoters of the next Joe Frazier-Muhammad Ali prize fight decided to stage their international extravaganza in Butte, Montana.
One observer said the chess match was turning into the biggest thing to hit Iceland since Eric the Red. Though some people were still mad at Fischer, others approved of his holdout for more money.
Well, he was fighting for all the chess players of the whole world, I think.
He's tedious, he's arrogant, he's inconsiderate. Basically, people think that there's something wrong with the man.
We wanted to receive him as a king, but Bobby saw all the crowd coming against him. So he just rushed down the ramp to the first car in the convoy.
That became his private bodyguard. It was a big moment for me, you know. I was more of his friend than a bodyguard. He was quite a character, you know. He could be gentle, but he could be like a volcano sometimes. And it was better to know when to speak and when to keep quiet, actually.
Finally, Bobby showed up in Iceland. Now, is he going to really play for the World Championship?
It's been a long road for Fischer to this game, and it'll be a long match at the end of that road. Both he and Spassky have to play 24 games. The match could last up to 2 months. Each game runs to 5 hours. The most intellectually exhausting battle known to the mind of man. The World Chess Championship.
We had the Icelandic government, the Icelandic president, the ambassador of the Soviet Union, the ambassador of the United States, and many foreign guests. The theater was full.
Regularly scheduled programs will not be seen at this time, so we may bring you the following sports special. ABC Sports presents the World Chess Championship match between Boris Spassky, the defending champion from the Soviet Union, and 29-year-old Bobby Fischer, the challenger from the United States.
It was the Super Bowl. The audiences were gigantic. People stayed home from work.
People were lining up in front of TV sets in department stores. There were chess groupies.
On Times Square, they were showing the game live. It was that important.
Let's find out from you, Larry, if there are any late-breaking developments.
They might fuss around with the chess pieces and the size of the board and the lighting, but I'm fairly confident the match will start on time.
Boris Spassky, the world chess champion, was there with all his assistants. But Fischer was not here.
The clock has now been started. It was officially 5 o'clock in Reykjavik. Spassky is obviously anxious about the whereabouts of Mr. Fischer.
Bobby was nowhere to be seen. And all of us despaired.
If Fischer doesn't show up by the time 1 hour has elapsed, he forfeits the game automatically. Oh, there he goes now. He's just played one, pawn to queen 4.
You saw Spassky make his move, then he touched his clock, which turns his clock off, but turns his opponent's clock on. So Fischer's time is now ticking.
There was no certainty that even though this was the biggest match of his life, he would actually show up.
See, many people think that his antics were designed to upset Spassky, to discombobulate Spassky, which they did, but I don't think that was their intent.
I don't think any of this was directed against Spassky. It was his own inner demons that he was fighting.
Unpredictable Bobby Fischer.
Nobody really knows why Bobby Fischer does or does not do anything.
The most individualistic, intransigent, uncommunicative, solitary chess master of all time.
He has no permanent home.
Fischer is a nomad.
Speaks to almost no one.
No contact with his family.
Troubled childhood.
He hasn't seen his mother in over 10 years.
Is your mother still living? Do you get a chance to see her very much?
I haven't seen her in a few years, yeah.
What about your father?
No, I don't see him.
Are they living together?
No, her.
I never talk about my father. That's what Fischer said. I never talk about my father. This was what led me to realize that there was something special about Fischer's father that nobody else knew.
Regina Fischer has a 900-page FBI file, and one of the things it reveals is that Bobby Fischer's father was not Gerhard Fischer, as had been supposed and as the family had allowed to be known. In fact, Bobby Fischer's father was a man named Paul Nemenyi.
Gerhard Fischer, who was officially listed on the birth certificate, never came to America.
Regina and Paul Nemenyi met at a university near Denver, and they had an affair. Regina moved on and took the baby Bobby with her. Regina often, because she was destitute and needed help, would go to social service agencies and ask for help. Paul Nemenyi would show up and consult with the social workers because he was very concerned about Bobby. He said that Bobby, even at a very young age, was a very upset child. He was afraid that he wasn't being raised right. Later, when Bobby moved to New York City, Paul would come and take him out to restaurants and would admonish him for having bad table manners. and would basically act towards him in the way that a father would. One day, Bobby asked his mother, "Where's Paul? Why isn't he coming around anymore?"
When Nemanja died, that's when his mother told him he was his real father. He learned about it only about the time he was 9 years old.
Chess to him was the ultimate escape, his single obsession.
Well, Spassky is waiting.
Right, and waiting and wondering whether Bobby will show or not show. And there's absolutely dead silence in the hall.
Spassky is pacing, he's nervous, and...
Wait, here comes Fischer, coming on the stage saying that he was caught in traffic. And I think Spassky is visibly relieved.
And also perhaps pained.
It didn't look like this match would happen, but finally it happened. And it was phenomenal.
How do you spell relief, okay?
Now, for the first time, we're looking at Bobby Fischer, the man that 8 times has won the United States Open Championship.
I remember saying on TV at one point during the match, I said, you know, we're really lucky to be alive at this moment when Bobby Fischer is playing Boris Spassky.
There's his first move, 1 knight to king bishop 3. Very non-committal.
Now watch, see Fischer turn around here? Yeah. He's checking to see that camera location. And now he goes over to protest those cameras being there.
There's Lothar Schmidt in the background.
Bobby said, "I feel disturbed. I cannot have that, please."
Spassky remains serene and imperturbable throughout all this.
The first game started out with some minor psychological games in the opening, but then it calmed down, and the position that we reached after 28 moves seemed like a complete draw. It seemed like they're going to agree to a draw shortly and move on to the next game.
All the pieces were traded. They got into an end game. Each side had a bishop and a bunch of pawns.
It was very easy. It was a dead draw. The position reached a very even position, virtually symmetrical.
And Fischer went haywire. He did something that hardly anyone would do except a rank amateur. He grabbed a pawn, allowing his bishop to be trapped.
He made a colossal beginner's blunder. He took a pawn, which allowed Spassky to trap his bishop. We couldn't believe it.
This looks like an error, but this is Fischer playing the move. There must be more to it than that. There must be an explanation. There must be some deep combination that we've missed.
И думал, что в крайнем случае он все же ничьей добивается. Но он хотел показать Спасскому, что он готов с ним бороться. Вот и он пошел на эту борьбу. Но Фишер ошибся.
Bobby saw 6 moves ahead here. When he made the move, he just didn't see 7 moves ahead. White can interpolate a move. He can play bishop to queen, too. Notice that cuts off the escape square. And then all that White has to do on the next move is play king to knight 2, and the bishop is lost. That was the shot heard around the world.
It was inexplicable. I still don't know how that happened.
Spassky won the first game.
You had to get to 12.5 points, the best of 24. A win is 1, a loss is 0, and a draw is 1/2.
He had an agreement that the cameras be quiet, and Bobby said they aren't quiet, and they disturb me.
He claimed that the noise from the machines was so high that he couldn't, you see, he couldn't think or concentrate.
I believe that, by the way. I think that he had hyperacusis, a medical condition characterized by excessive sensitivity to noise.
Fischer said he would boycott the match until hidden movie cameras are removed from the playing hall. The promoters said the entire financial structure of the match depends on recording and exhibiting the play.
He asked to put the camera away.
He wanted me to clear the cameras out of the hall. And I said, no.
You have to start in time. If a player is not present, you have, as an arbiter, press his clock.
Fischer had been known to quit matches over trivia. So we were afraid that he would just, you know, run back home and would be the end of it.
Bobby did not show up. I had, as the arbiter, to forfeit him, and for a moment I thought, did I make the right decision? Was it fair? Was it correct? But it was necessary. There was no other way. This night I remember that I have been woken up by tears in my eyes, that I, as an arbiter, had to destroy a genius.
He was now trailing 2-0. It's very hard to make that up in a 24-game match.
Half the world thought that's it. The match is over, he'll never come back. Why would he even bother trying, you know, to come back from such a difficult situation?
During the match, he would knock on my door about 1 or 2 in the morning. We'd just walk and walk. And we would sit and look at the animals. He loved animals. And he would talk, but he didn't like to talk about his childhood. It was a bad subject. He did tell me that, like, from the age of 2 or 3, he was left alone all day with his sister. The loneliness.
Regina, for all of her gifts, was not a traditional mother. She was a person who moved her kids around from place to place, you know, even every few months when they were really little.
There was obvious conflict between Regina and Bobby from an early age.
He didn't like to have his mother around. She would end up having to send his sister Joan abroad with him on tournaments. He wouldn't play if his mother was along. Regina moved out of the apartment that he shared with her in Brooklyn when he was only 16 years old.
He told his mom to leave, I don't know how politely, and she left. In a way, he rejected her because she was so like him, so pushy, so self-centered, so goal-directed. Maybe he was splitting off part of himself.
In 1960, Regina went to Europe to get her MD degree, and Bobby would have still been living on Lincoln Place in Brooklyn then.
I went to his apartment a couple of times, and it was roach-ridden. It was a walk-up tenement. He had chess books all over the place, and he was just in a complete state of disarray.
The fact is, his mother left him. Think about yourself. If suddenly your father wasn't there and your mother disappeared, said goodbye, how'd you feel? What would have happened to you?
Bobby is all chess. I don't play chess, and I don't pretend to speak for Bobby. But I feel that whatever I do here, whatever I say to help make the Vietnam come to an end more quickly, will help every son, every daughter in the whole world.
1, 2, 3, 4, sign the treaty, end the war. 1, 2, 3, 4, sign the treaty, end the war. 1, 2, 3, 4, sign the treaty, end the war.
You're not going to believe this, Bill, but I'm inside of a wind tunnel about 12 feet away from where the players are playing. The problem, of course, is that Fischer has stated that he wants no noise, no disturbance whatsoever.
Fischer said, well, I'll continue, but the third game has got to be away from the auditorium, inside a sealed room. There's a little ping pong room in the back of the stage. And Spassky agreed.
You can't change the location without both sides' permission once a match has started.
He could have claimed the match on a forfeit. He didn't have to play in that back room. If he hadn't, Fischer would have not played, and the match would not have continued.
Bobby started again to quarrel. No, not this one and not that, etc. And Boris said in this moment, so I retire. I do not want this. This is too much for me. If so, we end the match. The two boys were standing together at the table, and I took them here, both, pressed them down the stool. Now you play. Boris automatically made his first move.
The game could still be watched by a closed-circuit TV camera.
The audience was in the hall, and they could follow the game move by move.
In Game 3, Bobby played an opening, a defense he had never played before, the Benoni, which means son of sorrow. It is so risky, so fraught with danger, that whenever you play that, you're simply saying, we're not going to make a draw. This is win or lose. This is a fight to the death.
Bobby moved his knight to the edge of the board.
There's a saying in chess, Ein Springer am Rand bringt Kummer und Schande. A knight on the side I will not abide. It was against principle.
It's not considered a good idea because the center of the board typically is the most important battleground, and that's where we want to position our pieces, or at least in a way that our pieces attack the middle of the board.
Not only did he move the knight to the side of the board, but it also could have been captured by a bishop, and he would have had a very ugly-looking double pawn way over on the side of the board, which it was very unaesthetic, let's say.
So you see Spassky is literally sitting on the edge of his chair, which seemed a little more relaxed than Spassky, but Spassky is very tense.
More tense than you've seen him?
Yes. I think he feels that he may be
He may be what?
maybe losing the game.
I see.
Spassky obviously hadn't spent that much time studying this kind of position because the move was, well, the idea was relatively rare. So that put already Spassky in a difficult psychological position.
Spassky did not find the best continuation and was consistently outplayed until Fischer won his first game of his life against Spassky. He was on the scoreboard.
What do you think of Bobby Fischer?
I like him. I like his style.
Are you following the game?
Yes, I am.
American chess players are behind Bobby 100%, and they're all anxious to see him get in there and win the championship.
Do you think that Fischer will win for the first time over the Russian champion?
I think Fischer will win because he's playing for $200,000. But if Spassky wins, most of the money will go to the Russian government.
People sat in bars betting on what the next move is going to be, the way they bet on whether there's going to be a hit in a baseball game. That's when chess really exploded.
Move me on to any black square. Use me anytime.
Tell me what turns you on about chess?
What?
Do you hope to be as good as Bobby Fischer one day?
Well, I'd hope to, but I doubt if I would be.
Why?
Well, I just think Fischer's just about the best player in the world. Not very many people can get to be as good as he is.
We're watching the looming presence of Boris Spassky and Bobby Fischer, as sketched by Leroy Neiman, noted artist and a familiar face to Wide World. Leroy is here with me at the Wide World studio in New York, and he's going to be sharing some of his artistic impressions with us in just a minute.
Larry, I thought going up there to the chess match would be like watching the grass grow, but it was far more exciting than I ever expected it to be.
Well, I thought it was pretty exciting, too.
It was just like the Ali Fraser fight all over again. This is Bobby Fischer leaving the hotel for the fight like a matador leaving the Palace Hotel in Madrid. On stage, the tension is developing. It's a real prize fight. That's when he's a fighter. And this right hand is like it struck and drew blood on Spassky.
The score was even. 2.5, 2.5.
Spassky was not himself. All these shenanigans had affected him adversely. He was not playing his true game.
Полный разгром, фиаско. Почему Спасский был, в какой-то степени упрям? Потому что, когда встречается двое, я повторяю, нет, и когда кто-то что-то уступает, нету вакуума психологического. Если ты уступил, то это место занял другой. Вот так произошло в третьей партии. К нам поступила, наверное, масса писем, в письмах говорилось прямо: следите за Фишером, он вот то-то, то-то, то-то делает.
They believed that the chairs had been wired and the lighting fixture to destabilize Boris's concentration. That's when Boris cracked.
Spassky complained that there was some radiation which was affecting him.
During the match, I felt myself quite unusually, like before. So that was the reason to be for myself. I'm not suspicious man, to become suspicious.
There might be something in the chair. There might be something on the surface of the chair. There might be something in the light.
They inspected the chairs and the lights to see whether the Americans were up to some kind of hanky-panky. They found 2 dead flies, and that was it.
Game 6 is very celebrated. It is probably the most reprinted game of the entire match. It was like a symphony of placid beauty.
Right on the first move, Bobby Fischer came up with a major surprise to the entire world. He almost always starts the game with moving the pawn in front of his king 2 pawns up with e4.
Что он был очень постоянен. Ел манную кашу и яйцо в смятку и чашку кофе, то он продолжал это в течение многих лет. То он из турнира в турнир продолжал это
And in this game, everybody's shock. He started with the English opening by playing c4. Spassky's preparation was out the window. I'm sure he prepared for many things, but not this.
Fischer did not play his usual game. He played a different kind of game, a placid, positional, slowly building up game, where he deprived Spassky of mobility, pushed him back where his pieces could not do anything.
It was just a beautiful game. I don't know what more can be said about it. It was just a model of precision.
It was such a beautiful game that when the crowd applauded at the end of the game, Spassky himself stood up and applauded Fischer.
On his way back to the hotel, Fischer said, "Did you see what Spassky did?" He said, "That's a sportsman. He's a real sportsman."
Game 21 reached move 40, the move at which the game was adjourned for the two players to go and study it.
This is NBC Nightly News, Friday, September 1st.
Good evening. We'll have more on the developments in the Watergate bugging case. We'll hear George McGovern talking about tightening up his campaign organization, and we'll have a look at the new unemployment figures. And first, Bobby Fischer. Today was the day when Fischer and the Russian champion, Boris Spassky, were to have finished the 21st game of the World Championship, a game they started yesterday. But Spassky, after what must have been an agonizing night spent analyzing his position, didn't even show up to play.
I was going to photograph Spassky in the morning. He came straight over to me, shook my hand and said, "There is another world champion. His name is Robert James Fischer." I went back to the loft leader, to Bobby's room, and I told him Spassky just retired. And I want to be the first to congratulate you.
Congratulations. How you feel, babe? Tell us how you feel about it. You said you were going to go away. Listen, will you talk to us, Bobby? Bobby, roll the window down.
Bobby wanted to get away because they were banging on the door and all that, just to beat it out into the hills. Someone brings up the New York Post, and it says, "Bobby is the champ."
His mother had said to him when she saw she couldn't separate him from chess, she said, "Okay, go play chess. When that's over, you can start your life. You can do something important."
NBC News correspondent Dick Schaap was in Iceland today, and here's what Fischer said.
How does it feel now? You have the world championship. You're the best in the world at what you've devoted your life to. How does that feel inside?
Feels pretty good, yeah. I mean, my goal now is to play a lot more chess. I feel I haven't played enough chess.
How did it feel inside? All this through the mayor, or did you ever thought of anything like that?
No, I never, thought this was going to happen with chess. I just hope this keeps on.
I just had a premonition that something awful was going to happen to him. I didn't know what it would be, but I didn't feel good about it.
One of Fischer's problems was that after the match, he was supposedly better known by the population of the world than anyone except for Jesus Christ. And he was a guy who treasured his privacy. He had a problem.
The entire world knows the name Bobby Fischer by now. Was it a letdown after it was all over, Bobby? I mean, it was, well, there must have been a tremendous...
It was. I woke up the day after the thing was over, and I just felt different, like something had been taken out of me.
He didn't really, after he won, know what he wanted to do with his life. He reached at an end point when he was 29.
He was 29 years old, and he hadn't had a childhood.
Well, is it not true that the chess masters are always young men, and that they don't last?
That's been true, generally speaking, but there are exceptions. Steinitz, who was 63 when he was world champion.
But you're in a fortunate position, because most of us in life, no matter how successful we think we are, we still have to do what other people want us to do, just to hold jobs. But you don't have to hold a job, or you're on your own. It's a unique position.
That's right. You can't say, well, if Fischer won't come, we'll get some other chess genius who's the best in the world.
Bobby Fischer, the world champion chess player, has until midnight tonight to decide whether to abide by the international rules of chess or give up his title. If Fischer defaults, the title would go to the challenger, Soviet Grandmaster Anatoly Karpov.
He wanted probably to play the kid from Russia, Karpov, and beat him. I mean, it would be an easy task. On the other hand, part of him knew he could lose, and that's death to Bobby. He didn't want to risk that. So what came out was a series of new demands on the rules.
First of all, I like to play matches without draws. And they're going to have to increase the prizes if they want me to play. Once I get the title, they want me to play a match for the title. I'm not going to just play for what their minimum prizes are.
Accepting all Fischer demands was unacceptable politically for the Soviet Chess Federation.
Barring a very unlikely last-minute change of heart by Fischer, Anatoly Karpov becomes the new champion by default.
The World Chess Party gave him about 95% of what he wanted. But that was it. He didn't defend his title.
I
think he was unable to cope with his own invincibility. He got more or less scared to sit down again in front of the board and risk losing. But only he who never plays never loses.
We all felt disappointed that he'd let chess down, he'd let the American masters down. Yeah, we all felt kind of a betrayal.
Others could suffer from a period of creative depression after such debacle.
I went out to California on a job, phoned Bobby, picked him up in Pasadena, where he was staying, some cult place he was staying.
I've had so many bad experiences
And he would talk about nuclear disarmament, our capabilities, his ICBMs and that, you know. And that would go on for about an hour and a half.
Just what is the Worldwide Church of God?
Bobby had been involved with the Church of God since 1962. And after he won the championship, the church was providing him with a place.
The Worldwide Church of God was a group of people that believed in fundamental principles of the Bible. Some people would probably call us fundamentalists.
That will bring on the great tribulation, and that will end in the second coming of Christ, the end of this present civilization.
Basically, a sense that there was an impending coming Christ, and we need to prepare for that particular second coming.
I told him it's all a bunch of hooey, but that's what he chose to do.
I have warned you may be living in the time in which you will see.
I went to his apartment in Pasadena. It seemed to me pretty hopeless.
He was extremely depressed. We would get into these long discussions about the Bible. Why are we here? What are we doing here? What is life?
Power and strength under the beast.
That's when he started to go haywire.
He felt that he was being influenced by these Russians, and he also was scared of the Mossad, Israeli secret police. He felt that he could be easily spied upon through radioactivity and through other means, fillings.
He thought maybe the Russians could send signals here.
Phones.
Tinfoil over the windows.
Media, radioactive. This is paranoia. We tried, as church members, to bring him in to a little more of a normal life.
I think he turned against the Worldwide Church of God when one of its prophecies patently did not come to pass.
That in the last days, at these times right now in which we're living, perilous times shall come.
Fischer felt betrayed. He wrote a pamphlet attacking the church and Armstrong, its leader, saying that nobody should ever control your mind.
I was never a member of the Church of God. Absolutely not true. It's a lie.
As he denied God, he began to get worse.
He started to go astray. He started reading the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which he mentioned to me, and I said, that book is a forgery, and it's a hoax, and it's a bit of anti-Semitic propaganda that even Hitler used.
Protocol number 1. What has restrained the wild beast we call men?
He got into all these doctrines.
What has influenced them heretofore?
The Illuminati, all these different people that were going to take over the world.
Protocol number 9. Merciless revenge and bitter hatred. From us emanates an all-embracing terror.
We began to see less of Bobby because we didn't want to expose our children to the famous uncle who's become fulminating anti-Semite.
Hitler said in Mein Kampf that the Jews are not the victims, but they're the victimizers.
We could be having dinner and he would suddenly start thinking about the Jews did this and the Jews did that, and in our house it was just unacceptable.
They're actually making things happen and causing revolutions and killing people all over the world. We start mixing fish with humans and anything's possible.
His mother was Jewish. His real father was Jewish. It's complete madness.
The question is, how could a Jewish kid become an anti-Semite? Paranoid psychosis. He had false fixed ideas of a very widening conspiracy against him. It was as if he were at war with himself.
He became a recluse. Fischer watchers refer to it as the wilderness years.
Where's Bobby these days?
Oh, Bobby's at home.
We're in New York.
Well, I don't think that I want to get onto the subject of Bobby. You know how Bobby feels about it.
Last conversation we had enraged him. If you don't play chess, there will soon come a time when no one will ask you to play chess. He thought that was unacceptable. And that was the end of our relationship.
If you look throughout history, there have been a disproportionate number of extremely talented chess players who've also had serious psychological issues.
You are putting yourself in a world that is infinite. It's abstract. You are, in essence, reshaping your mind. If you understand that in the first move of a chess game, each player has 20 possible moves. If you multiply 20 by 20, that means there are 400 different possible chess positions after the first move.
The tree becomes with a lot of branches, you know, that you start with one move, and on that one move there are several options. Then all of a sudden it becomes a jungle.
The number of all positions that theoretically can occur in the game of chess is something like 10 with 45 zeros. It's like the number of atoms in the solar system.
You're trying to anticipate what your opponent might do, and you don't know what he might do, so you're thinking of all the different possibilities. A good chess player is paranoid on the board, but then if you take that paranoia to real life, it doesn't play so well. You end up seeing your real world according to the confines of chess.
There were some that came to a sad end. I mean, we like to think that chess didn't cause that, but maybe it didn't.
An individual with an unbalanced tendency, by becoming a chess monomaniac, will throw himself over the brink.
Yeah, we have some examples where people of exceptional abilities were infected by this mental illness.
Victor Korchnoi claimed to have played a match with a dead man. He even provided the moves.
Rubinstein.
Rubinstein jumped out the window because the fly was after him.
Wilhelm Steinitz.
Steinitz was in an institution.
Steinitz in late life thought he was playing chess by wireless with God Almighty, and had the better of God Almighty.
Carlos Torre took all his clothes off on a bus.
And the probably greatest name, the greatest impact on the game of chess in the 19th century belonged to an American player, Paul Morphy. Unfortunately, there's some resemblance with Fischer.
Paul Morphy was an American player who stunned the world with his chess play. And then at age 26, he wandered the streets aimlessly, he muttered to himself, he became a paranoid schizophrenic.
His tour in Europe in 1858, 1859 was one of the most unforgettable events in the history of chess. And then Morphy stopped playing chess.
There are many similarities between Morphy and Fischer.
People are always going to equate their names together.
They both gave up the game at the height of their powers.
And disappeared into a world of neurosis, of psychosis.
Where did Bobby Fischer go?
What happened to Bobby Fischer?
We spent countless hours prowling the streets where he's been known to roam, looking for him at chess clubs where he's been known to play. Ultimately, the Now investigation was successful. We found Bobby Fischer. The quest paid off.
In 1990, he shows up in Pasadena, a little on the heavy side. He's handing me this letter. Mr. Fischer, you are the Mozart of the chess world. I want you to get back into chess. Her name was Zita. I wonder what she looks like, Harry. All of a sudden, he's romantically entwined. She got him off all of his rationalizations why he couldn't play chess anymore. And she set up the tournament.
After many false alarms, it was a 19-year-old Hungarian chess player, Zita Reiksani, who brought Fischer back to chess. Do you think he's still as handsome now? What do you think? As a result of their meeting, Zita rushed off to arrange Bobby's comeback.
The chess world was shaken today with news that an old legend lives, apparently ready to risk himself in public again. Headlines around the world announced he'd signed a contract to play a rematch with his old Russian rival from Iceland, Boris Spassky.
I was in the chess world. Everybody's waiting for him to play for 20 years. I mean, month after month, year after year, there are these stories. He's negotiating this. You know, someone's trying to raise this for him. He wouldn't play. Finally, he plays.
He was playing in Yugoslavia against Spassky. It was trumpeted as a return World Championship match.
This is a typical question from Mr. Roger Cohen of the New York Times. If you beat Spassky, would you go on to challenge Kasparov for the World Championship? Can he read what it says behind here?
The match took place in Yugoslavia during the middle of the Yugoslav War, and by participating, Fischer broke a UN-backed embargo.
The U.S. government sent him a letter and said, don't play. If you do, you're going to go to jail.
This is my reply to their order not to defend my title here. That's my answer.
The match of '92, in my view, had no chess relevance. They played a very decent chess, but it was chess of 1972.
It's like watching two old boxers come back into the ring for one last payday. A slightly sad affair where both players are clearly past their best. Both Fischer and Spassky are shadows of their former selves.
He won and won several $1 million, but was declared a criminal for having taken part in the match.
Today, a federal grand jury here in Washington charged Robert James Bobby Fischer with a criminal violation of the United States imposed sanctions on the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Fischer faces up to 10 years in prison, and the millions of dollars of proceeds of the chess match are forfeitable to the United States. Bobby Fischer, like anyone else, should be held accountable for his actions.
The cost was very high. I mean, he lost his country, he couldn't come back, he was indicted. A lot of people questioned the validity of this indictment, but it was a law, so Fischer broke the law.
He couldn't come back in the country. They were out to arrest him, so he became an expatriate.
They said if I return, I will be arrested, and if I'm convicted, it could be millions of dollars and 10 years in prison for playing chess, which is absurd, you know.
I saw him in Yugoslavia, but it was pointless. You know, he was gone. It was no longer a story.
I knew Zita. I knew her personally. And she was a nice girl, but who knows what he did there.
Joan had gone to Hungary in 1995 to visit Bobby when he was staying in Budapest. That's the last of our family who'd seen him. Regina died in '96, and my wife Joan died in 1998 from a cerebral hemorrhage, no forewarning at all. Died within a half a day.
It was a tragedy. His mother dies, his sister dies.
Bobby was stripped of any family support that he could hope for. And when he was a man without a country, he got worse and worse.
我们来看这条震惊世界的消息。北京时间今天晚上8点30分左右。
This is all wonderful news. It's time for the fucking U.S. to get their heads kicked in. It's time to finish off the U.S. once and for all. This just shows you that what goes around comes around, even for the United States.
He felt that he was above politics and could say whatever he wanted to say And George Bush says, no, you're not. I can grab you wherever you are.
United States citizen Robert Bobby Fischer has been detained by Japanese authorities on alleged immigration law violations.
I got a collect phone call from Japan. From who I said, or she said, Bobby Fischer. 22 years, I haven't heard from him, not anything. But he must have kept me in the drawer or something, so I was not completely forgotten when he needed me. And I went to Japan to get this man out of jail. When I saw him there, that was on his birthday. He asked me if I could help him out, you know. I said, I will see what I can do.
Yfirmaðurinn hann segir það að Bobby Fischer hann yrði leystur úr haldi til land sem reiðubúið þess að veita honum ríkisfang.
Iceland has stood up and offered him residency. Iceland has stood up and given him passport. At the end, we, this small nation of 300,000 people, intervened and went against the United States and Japan, the two strongest economies in the world, and got him to Iceland.
Þarna örþreyttur Bobby Fischer borð ásamt unnustvitsinu og föruneyti eins og Páll Magnússon sagði. Hann verður flautur. Welcome to Iceland, Mr. Fischer. How does it feel to be home?
Great.
You're getting quite a hero's welcome. Did you expect this?
No, I didn't.
We've got a car waiting for you. This is your first time in Iceland in quite a few years. You weren't that thrilled the first time around. Think it will be better this time?
That is not true. I never... You mean I didn't want to play here originally?
Yeah.
I'll explain all that. That was all a CIA setup. I'll explain that someday.
We look forward to that. Bobby Fischer, welcome to Iceland and thanks for talking to us. Have a good night. Bobby Fischer fyrir Íslandi. Hefur ekki mótið þessu.
Sorry for keeping you waiting.
How does it feel to be a free person?
Oh, it feels great. You got a wonderful country, wonderful fresh air, very fine people, excellent food, plenty of room.
What's next, Bobby?
I still want to do a book showing how the 1984-85 Karpov-Kasparov match was prearranged, move by move. They're all saying, oh, Fischer didn't write the book he said he was going to write. Yeah, but they don't say that they stole all my file on it. They don't say they stole several big moving boxes full of books that took me years to accumulate. What is your name?
Jeremy.
Jeremy what?
Schaap.
Your father was Dick Schaap, you were telling me last night?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I knew him, yeah. He rapped me very hard. He said that I don't have a sane bone in my body. I didn't forget that. His father, many, many years ago, befriended me. Took me out to see, I don't remember what.
Knicks games.
Knicks games, and
you were 12.
Acted kind of like a father figure. And then later, like a typical Jewish snake, he had the most vicious things to say about me.
I have to object, Bob.
Okay. Did you read the article where he said I don't have a sane bone in my body?
Honestly, I'm not sure if I read it, but I know that he said it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know that you've done much here today, really, to disprove anything he said.
I met Bobby after he came to Iceland. His existence was a very lonely one. He gradually In Iceland, like everywhere else, he alienated people with his behavior.
I had one huge safe.
We just walked around the pond downtown Reykjavik, and we talked, and we had coffee together, and then I met him a few times when I ran into him on restaurants, etc.
The U.S. didn't give a damn what their opinions were anymore. Their role was over. Now the bomb belonged to the government. You understand?
This is.
And they were shocked. They didn't believe it.
Listen to me. If we are going to have a fucking conversation, all right?
Yeah,
then this cannot be a monologue, all right? He could not tear himself from the topic of the evil nature of the Jews and the evil nature of the United States or the evil nature of nuclear power. He talked about this relentlessly, and you really couldn't pull him out of that discussion. It was not just that he was talking about it. It was also the obsessive, compulsive nature of the discussion, the relentless nature of it.
You don't see how fucked up the world is. That's a form of insanity.
The last time I ran into him, I turned him away from my table because I had gotten enough of him. Most of us think within relatively narrow boundaries, but occasional individuals manage to get outside of the box. Those are the people who make new discoveries. Those are the creative people. But occasionally, it is difficult to get back into the box.
When the king moves, takes the queen.
His genius.
Gonna stick a knight here.
And his illness are joined at the hip.
And now he took the rook.
I don't think that Bobby could have been as creative, as extraordinary, without being extraordinary in other aspects. And that aspect we call a disease.
So the whole game's collapsing here. It's we resigned.
I don't consider myself to be a genius at chess. I consider myself more to be a genius who just happens to play chess. You understand? So I could be doing I could have done and I can do any number of other things, you know? You know, I always wanted to write some songs. I was telling Evans, Larry Evans, this was back in the 60s, I remember. I said, you know, I listen to all these songs and I wish I could write that, but I try to write something, I try to think of something, and I just, nothing comes out. And he says, yeah, because you haven't lived. And I started thinking about it. He's right. My test library, all my other regular library, all my personal correspondence, all my chess tests, all kind of stuff. Everything is stolen. Everything. All my test library.
He died from a psychiatric illness. He did not want to accept treatment for benign prostatic hypertrophy.
He refused dialysis, I understand. Probably could have prolonged his life if he'd taken it.
I was able to get him a photograph of Regina and Joan to have with him, which is what he had with him in the hospital when he died.
Reportedly, Fischer's last words were, "Nothing is so healing as the human touch."
The former world champion of chess, Bobby Fischer, has died. His career reached its height during matches with his nemesis, Boris Spassky, back in 1972.
American chess superstar Bobby Fischer has just died.
Former world chess champion Bobby Fischer has died. Considered by many as the greatest chess player of all time.
Bobby Fischer dead at the age of 64.
Just his games, that's his monument. His games.
If you love an art, let's say you love painting, imagine if Picasso had died after only 5 years of work. All the rest of his works had never appeared. This was a tragedy for the whole chess world.
He did it all by himself. He penetrated the secrets of chess in this shabby Brooklyn apartment. He was the best player who ever lived.
Bobby Fischer, sound roll 3. Right.
Reed. Bobby, you've been playing this game since you were 6 years old and playing it very seriously shortly after the age of 6. Did all this concentration to the exclusion of other activities, did this bother you? Do you think this deprived you of anything growing up?
Maybe, yeah, to some extent, yeah.
Like what?
Well, it would have been better, you know, a little more balanced, yeah. Maybe, you know, a little more rounded, you know, but what can you do?
In New York City, summer's sweat, and the boys are rolling their cigarettes. The girls are singing into their phones, but Bobby Fischer is all alone. The parks are buzzing with the birds and the bees. Friends are hugging in 2s and 3s. Lovers are kissing and exchanging their rings, but Bobby Fischer's playing 18 Kings. They're screaming and crying at the YMCA. Bobby, Bobby, why'd you go away? His mother is whispering wide and low. Bobby, Bobby, where did you go? Newspapers roll all over the town, from the glistening sky tops to the filth on the ground. Just bang and explode all over Times Square. Bobby is gone and no one knows where. Is he in London? Is he in Spain? Has he cut off his hair? Has he changed his last name? Is he under that rock? Is he behind that tree? Oh, Bobby, Bobby, where can you be?
All right, I hope you enjoyed the documentary. Hope you got through it all. And again, I really enjoyed watching that documentary. And if you're into people who are geniuses and just have these great minds and who've accomplished great feats, then hopefully you appreciated it as much as I did. So let's get into his chart. Bobby Fischer. So here's Bobby Fischer's chart right here. He was born March 9th, 1943. And as you can see, he's a Leo rising with Pluto in the first. He has Moon in Taurus, Venus in Aries, Sun in Pisces, Saturn and Uranus in Gemini, Mercury and the South Node in Aquarius in the 8th, Mars at the 0 degree of Aquarius in the 7th, Neptune in Libra in the 3rd, North Node, Chiron in Leo in the 2nd, Jupiter in Cancer in the 12th, Black Moon Lilith in Cancer in the 12th. All right, so let's get started. So here's Bobby as a young boy, starting off on his career in chess. So birth number 9 can make one very individualistic, can make one a lone wolf, and that he was definitely a lone wolf type of character. Being number 1 and also being the first to do something. So he was like the first youngest champion. Conflict driven, egotistical, dominant, athletic. Now, you know, any type of game involves competition. So just know that the ego usually is rather large for people that are very competitive. And as you could see, Bobby Fischer, he's a Leo rising with Pluto and Leo in the first. So we're talking about very competitive, and that just reinforces the ego with that birth number 9. He was also very athletic too, as that documentary showed. The term on the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer applies to this number 9, but there was a time where people were actually searching for him because he fell into obscurity and he became a recluse. Life path number 29, that breaks down to 11 and 2. Very apropos to his life story. 29 produces high pressure situations, and Bobby Fischer, his life, perfect example of grace under pressure. So 29 can produce high pressure situations that need to be handled with grace. And that's the epitome of being a chess grandmaster. High pressure, but you're handling it with grace. Conflicts with mother is very 29. Conflicts with women, home, family, race, and nationality. So he has a grand trine in his chart and also a kite aspect pattern. And the grand trine is part of the kite aspect pattern. And basically this kite is the chess grandmaster aspect pattern. Basically, this is what made him so successful and resulted in him being undefeated. So this grand trine consists of Mars, Uranus, and Saturn, Neptune. And then he has the sextile aspects completing the kite, which I'll get into in a minute. So Mars trine Neptune represents his focus on chess, especially in terms of intuiting what his opponent will do. Because Mars in Aquarius can make someone very intuitive. And when it's in the 7th house, that's them being very intuitive when it comes to other people. And like I said, Libra deals with chess. 7th house deals with chess. Now, chess is a game, which is Leo, but, there's different signs that rule different games. So chess ruled by Libra, and it makes a lot of sense because of the strategy that's required. Represents his opponent being shaken by Fischer's presence. Spassky in particular claims he was using some kind of radiation against him, where he thought he was at one point. And the radiation part is coming from Aquarius. The successful books he wrote about chess, such as Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess and My 60 Most Memorable Games. Mars trine Uranus and Saturn in Gemini. He was a brilliant strategist. Learns at lightning speed, an enlightened being, ability to have the lights the way he demanded. So he was very demanding when it came to how he wanted the setup to be when he would compete against someone. And if they wouldn't meet his demands, he wouldn't play. But that's very Aquarius, period. Because they could be tyrannical, my way or the highway. Also, this is representing the televised matches and how he basically took the world by storm. And he actually put chess on the map, especially for Americans, because typically, the typical American really wasn't into chess until Bobby Fischer came on the scene. So here's the grand trine that I'm talking about. Let me just highlight it. And then he has a kite involving these sextiles between Uranus and his ascendant, but also Saturn and Pluto, and then the ascendant in Libra. But in this case, Saturn's not part of the actual kite aspect pattern. It's Uranus forming a sextile with the ascendant forming a sextile with Neptune, Uranus forming a trine with Neptune, Mars trine Neptune, Mars trine Uranus. Now, Saturn is included with the trines, but not the sextiles because of the order, the difference with the order. But it is forming a sextile with Pluto. More about that in a minute. All right, so I'm going to go kind of fast. So you can always slow down the video or whatever, or just pause it if you need to reflect on some of what I'm saying. So Leo ascended sextile Neptune in Libra. That Neptune in Libra is in the 3rd house. And again, that Neptune is blessed in his chart. So Libra deals with chess again. So that Neptune in Libra in the 3rd house. Neptune deals with where you're totally immersed in something. So that's him being totally immersed in the game of chess, even to the point where it interfered with his schooling. More about that in a minute. Becoming fully immersed in the game of chess, being confident in his chess playing abilities, being a chess champion, being widely celebrated in the world of chess, being photographed, filmed, and drawn. He actually had a sketch artist that would draw him. And I don't even think it was something he wanted. This person just, he was commissioned to draw pictures of Bobby Fischer while he was playing chess. Attractive in a strange way. So Moonlight Orange mentioned that she thought that he was rather attractive, and I agree. There's just something that was quite attractive about him when he was young, but not in a traditional way. And yeah, he did have those bumps on his face and all that, so that was kind of like, that was a little off-putting, but yeah, he did have this magnetic attraction, I'll definitely say, and he did have Mars in Aquarius opposing his ascendant, which can produce magnetic attraction, but this can also produce some form of attractiveness as well. Ability to have people at his mercy. So Sun in Pisces trine Jupiter, and Jupiter's intercepted in that 12th house in Cancer. Here he is playing chess while he's in the bathtub, and that's just so Sun in Pisces. Absorbing knowledge, osmosis. Photographic memory, mastery. Whenever you have like Sun trine Jupiter, I actually have that in my chart, not in terms of the signs, but I do have Sun trine Jupiter, but that can manifest as mastery. Tapping into the superconscious universal mind hones his psychic abilities. So this one guy mentioned about Bobby Fischer, he said, it's about intuition. It's about imagining yourself forward. Bobby could just feel his way forward. That's the epitome of this trine between his Sun in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer in the 12th. Being totally immersed in whatever he was interested in this case, chess. Being a world traveler, being widely celebrated. Being granted asylum by Iceland. Mother believed in him and devoted much of her time to his talent. The foreign woman who convinced him to get back into playing chess. Mercury conjunct South Node in Aquarius in the 8th house. Mental genius and prowess. Mind is like a computer. Laser focus. Extremely intuitive. Obsessive when it came to learning and studying. Eccentricity intensified because of the 8th house placement. Mercury and South Node opposition Chiron and North Node in Leo. Strong sense of entitlement when it comes to how the game is to be played. Being unreasonable when it came to his demands. Jedi mind tricks. If you don't know about that, look it up. But basically is where you get in somebody's head and cause them to do things that they may not necessarily do on their own. Represents time when the Russian competitor, who was the chess champion at the time, claimed that Fischer was using some kind of radiation to thwart his attempts to win. And they actually did a whole investigation. They were searching all around the chess table and the chairs and stuff, and all they came up with was 2 dead flies. That's why I put 2 dead flies, but they talk about it in the documentary. His activism made him unpopular. So that North Node conjoined Chiron. Chiron deals with where one is exceptional, and it can also deal with awards that he's won for winning games. Saturn sextile Pluto. High degree of concentration when it came to playing the game. Fiercely competitive. Mind power on next level helped him win. Many hours of practice. Saturn rules 6th house via intercepted Capricorn. That's one of the things I love about Bobby Fischer's story. He was a genius, but not just, everything's just downloaded into his head. No, he studied for hours. He studied the game of chess. He memorized the plays. He basically wanted to become the best chess player there ever was, so he worked hard at it. And it totally consumed his life, but that's, that's how you become an expert and a master at something. It does have to basically consume your life. Playing multiple games at once. So there was times where he would be playing multiple opponents at once, multiple games. Like he'd just be walking around to different chess games and, playing. His win resulted in more people becoming interested in chess. The father figure that he had, high level of fitness, but that can also deal with him inheriting some of his talents or smarts from his father as well, because his father was very smart too. His father was a child prodigy, his real father. High level of fitness. Saturn rules the 6th house via intersected Capricorn. His manager, his coach, Saturn at the 6th degree of Gemini. Learn how to play chess at 6 years old. So that's dealing with that 6th degree of Gemini. Becomes the youngest U.S. chess champion. Uranus and Gemini sextile ascendant. Right now, I'm just getting into all the positive, free-flowing aspects of his chart, and then I'll get into the challenging aspects. So again, Uranus sextile ascendant is part of the kite aspect pattern in his chart, and kites can result in being mega successful and basically being phenomenal and knocking it out the park, and like just where you just become this, I'll just say, magnanimous, amazing type of individual. But the kite can't save you from some of the other problems that can happen in your life. I just want to put that out there. But it can make things easier on you in certain situations. And once you learn what you need to learn and master your craft, that's when everything else falls into place. Famous for his genius, attracting fans and followers, creating a trend, playing multiple games at once, tall in stature, bringing the element of surprise, unpredictability when facing his opponents, with Uranus ruling the 7th. Fischer's ability to get Spassky, the Russian chess champion, to cede his position to him, having power over opponent's mind, breaking records in the world of chess. Moon and Taurus square. Here we go with the challenging aspects. So his Taurus moon was squaring his Mars in Aquarius, and that could be a really challenging aspect. Mom could have been more concerned with money than Fischer as an individual, and that definitely was true. I saw this other documentary where this one guy was saying that Bobby Fischer would be embarrassed when his mom would be haggling over money when it came to his chess competition. But he ended up being that way once he got older. He was very much about negotiating and haggling over money. Conflicts regarding his race. Refusing to conform, and Jewish isn't necessarily a race, but basically we're going to call it a race for, race, culture, ethnicity. That moon is representing all of it. And both of his parents were Jewish, but when he was younger, he thought he was only half Jewish, but that's neither here nor there. He just didn't like how basically Jews dominate certain industries and how, their craftiness and things like that. Refusing to conform to U.S. policy on playing in Yugoslavia. The woman who convinced him to come out of hiding, which resulted in conflict with the U.S. government. Now, I'm not blaming her per se, but if she would have never convinced him to come out of hiding, he would have never, been in that predicament. But then again, this was all fated anyway. Conflict in Japan due to expired passport, and that's basically when the United States, they were after him. They had issued a warrant for his arrest because he played a game in Yugoslavia where the U.S. had sanctions against Yugoslavia at the time, and it was just a bunch of mess. But I believe it was a setup. I believe they were trying to get him because they considered him an anti-Semite at that time. Conflict over Fischer's activism against the U.S. and Jews, of which he was. So again, he was Jewish himself, but he was very critical of Jews as a collective, mainly the Jews in power. Easily upset and irritated with people, temperamental, would be quick to shut shit down and protest, even if it meant losing out on money. And with that moon in Taurus, that's, especially it being in the 10th house, that's representing his standards. He had high standards with respect to how the game was supposed to be set up. He didn't play around with this. So it says this quote right here: Fischer's career-long stubbornness about match and tournament conditions. So again, if they weren't meeting his standards, he wasn't going to play. Could be viewed as being on the autism or Asperger's spectrum with this square, mainly because that moon is in Taurus, and that can make him hypersensitive to external stimuli, which can result in being very guarded, kind of uptight, rigid about things. A lot of times the sign Taurus does come into play when it comes to autism or Asperger's. If he was autistic, I would say he would be an autistic savant. The ones that are very, that are basically geniuses, but they struggle in other areas. But then again, there's been psychiatrists that have analyzed him, like not, in a clinical setting, but just on paper. And a few of them said that he really didn't display signs of autism or even Asperger's, like he really didn't have it. But I'm just saying, like, for lack of a better term, a lot of people might describe him as being on the spectrum, whether it's autism or Asperger's, just because of his eccentricity and his level of genius. Moon in Taurus, quincunx Neptune in Libra. Socially awkward. It says, until late 1959, Fischer had dressed atrociously for a champion, appearing at the most august and distinguished national and international events in sweaters and corduroys. Now encouraged by Paul Benko to dress more smartly, Fischer began buying suits from all over the world, hand-tailored and made to order. He told journalist Ralph Ginzburg that he had 17 hand-tailored suits and that all of his shirts and shoes were handmade. So the quincunx deals with where you make adjustments. So this is him making adjustments to his style, his wardrobe, and especially at the behest of some guy that told him, Paul Benko, you got to dress more smartly. Being isolated. He was isolated ever since he was a little kid, and he lived a life basically of being isolated. Legal issues as a result of playing chess in Yugoslavia. Fischer emerged after 20 years of isolation to play Spassky, then tied for 96 102nd on the FIDE rating list in a revenge match of the 20th century in 1992. This match took place in Sveti Stefan and Belgrade, Yugoslavia, in spite of a United Nations embargo that included sanctions on commercial activities. Now, the reason why I'd be pointing at this woman is because she's the one that set up the match in Yugoslavia. That's why I'm wondering if she was a plant. Hiding out in another country, challenges with being with women, self-preservation, because chess won out. That's the main thing. Chess won out over everything. So with that, even the times when he was with women, he probably would push them to the side so that he could get a game of chess in, even if it meant playing by himself. Self-preservation often won out over his public appearances, being holed up in his manager's house. That woman may have been sent by a secret enemy. So again, I wouldn't be surprised. Attempts to jail Fischer, especially when he was in Japan, but it also happened in the United States, could be as a result of his anti-Semitic comments. Mars in Aquarius, opposition Pluto, and ascendant in Leo. Perceived actual threats. Oh, I'm sorry. That should say or. Let me change that real quick. It should say perceived or actual threats. So when you have this opposition, especially Mars opposition Pluto, you could feel threatened. Now, it could be just your perception. It could be your imagination, but sometimes it can deal with an actual threat. And with Aquarius, it could deal with a network or a group of people. Has to go up against someone or something. So this aspect became problematic once his chess career was over because he needed to go up against someone or something, and that's why he started going up against the government hard and Jews. Going up against the government / system, Mars ruling the 10th house after his chess career ends. Because again, he needs to go up against something. He needs an opponent. He needs to point the finger. He needs somebody that he can attack. Now, he was able to channel that into chess. But once chess is over, how does he channel it? Searching for Bobby Fischer. Again, that theme comes up. Represents Fischer intimidating his opponents. represents his abdication of the title of chess champion as a way of maintaining his sense of power and prowess, being under surveillance or investigation, being hated by some due to his controversial views, feeling targeted, harassed, his talk of microchips, conspiracy theories, gang stalking aspect. So this Mars, opposition Pluto, and ascendant could be actually a gang stalking aspect. And back then that term gang stalking wasn't known really, but he even claimed that he felt like he was being followed, he was being watched. Basically, he was being tracked down. He had Mercury in Aquarius, quincunx, Neptune in Libra. This is him adjusting his strategy. Attempted to avoid media attention a lot of times. He didn't like being photographed. The adjustments to the lighting and other stipulations of Fischer. Paranoia as a result of what he reads. Going over plays over and over in his head. Too impressionable, but will come out of it and change his perspective. Attempts to outwit his opponents in a sly way, such as using his eyes to convey messages or as intimidation. Attempts to circumvent certain laws. The type to jump out of bed and make a chess move. So with Neptune ruling sleep, this aspect could deal with times where he got very little sleep because he was too focused on playing chess. This quote right here deals with this quincunx. Fischer's interest in chess became more important than schoolwork to the point that by the time he reached the 4th grade, he'd been in and out of 6 schools. And Saturn is at the 6th degree of Gemini, if you remember, and that could deal with the 6 schools that he attended. Moon in Taurus square ascendant and Pluto in Leo. This right here could produce avoidant personality disorder, especially Moon square Pluto. Obsessive personality, could lack an appetite at times because he's so obsessed with the game. Loses it when he's not in control. Mother did not give him adequate attention until it was about money. And when you got Moon square Pluto, you might feel like your mother doesn't even want you. I have that square, and I went through that period, mainly in my preteens and teenage years. Like, I just felt like I was in my mother's way. And so feeling discarded by your mother, and there was another time in my life where it was actually where she did kind of discard me. But, you know, by then I was like 18, basically. But that Moon square Pluto can make you feel either rejected or discarded by your mother, or it can make you feel like you're in the way. Or in some cases, mom could be hella controlling. Mom could be even exploited. And that's what she was doing. She was exploiting his talents, and it was mainly about money for her. So control issues with mother. She even told his manager to ask Bobby to appear on TV since he would not have did it if she asked. Developing a hatred towards his own race, especially in terms of money and values. Ego can get in the way of his ability to earn money. Criminal charges. And again, that was from him violating the UN sanctions in Yugoslavia. Sun, Sesqui square ascendant, and Pluto and Leo, not comfortable in the limelight. Challenges with being famous. Throwing in the towel instead of losing. This quote right here deals with this aspect. The world championship he won validated his view of himself as a chess player, but it also insulated him from the humanizing influences of the world around him. That's that Pisces sun in the 9th house. He descended into what can only be considered a kind of madness. Now, a lot of people are speculating that he was crazy and all that stuff. I don't see it that way. A lot of people that are of high intelligence, and it was noted that he had a very high IQ. A lot of people of high intelligence are, you know, loners, they're introverts, they're recluses, and eccentric. So I'm like, this just goes with the territory. But like I said, with that Mars opposing his Pluto and ascendant, if he doesn't have chess to channel that energy into, he will kind of become obsessed with going after some type of person, group, something. Confusion over who his father is. Attempts to evade authorities. Reluctance to compete at times. Feeling lost once he had become world chess champion. challenges with enjoying life. This aspect also has to do with the fact that he joined this religion that was kind of cult-like, and then he ended up breaking away from it because he was very dissatisfied with the fact that the pastor, he was predicting the end times, and because it didn't happen when the pastor predicted, he basically was like, I'm out. And he basically accused the pastor of being corrupt or something like that. So that aspect is dealing with that as well. And that sun in Pisces, just especially in the ninth house, he was always trying to find himself on a spiritual level, especially once his chess career was over. So at the end of his life, he actually became a Catholic and had a Catholic funeral and all that. So that's very ninth house sun in Pisces. Sun in Pisces, semi-square moon in Taurus, may have forgotten to eat at times or had very little appetite, could have had a little fear of women, could have started with his mother, refusing to play unless they offered more money, issue with citizenship / visa. Actually, it was the passport in Japan, but that's kind of similar. Reclusive tendencies, being set up by that woman. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if that woman set him up. So here he is on the left, younger, and here he is much older, but he looks older than what he actually was. Like he was only 64 when he died, but he looks like he could be like 84 here. But from what I heard, he really wasn't taking good care of himself, and he died of kidney disease. Mercury in Aquarius square Uranus and Gemini. This is another aspect that could make him rather difficult, unreasonable, even down to the lighting. So again, but I kind of understand because lighting is a big deal, especially if you're going to spend hours doing something. Mind very changeable. So he would change his mind like in the blink of an eye and have everybody like just stressed out. Abrupt in communication, rude, bullying, mental disturbances, hated the media, shocking and radical commentary. Like the bullying part, like when he was working with a personal trainer and there was this grip machine where you could grip it and see how strong your hand strength was, and you could like do exercise with it to strengthen your hand. I think it's in the documentary. And he was saying, yeah, because when I shake that Russian's hand, I want him to feel it or something like that. So that's very much dealing with this energy. Venus in the Aries, semi-square Uranus in Gemini. Not an easy person to interview. Refusing to play his opponents unless everything was done according to his standards. Sometimes he had to give in, though. And this quote right here: as I made clear in my telegram to the 5 delegates, the match conditions I proposed were non-negotiable. Mr. Kramer informs me that the rules of the winner being the first player to win 10 games, draws not counting, unlimited number of games, it is 9 wins to 9 match is drawn with champion regaining title and prize funds split equally were rejected by the 5 delegates. By so doing, FIDE has decided against my participation in the 1975 World Chess Championship. Therefore, I resign my FIDE World Chess Championship title. Sincerely, Bobby Fischer. Thumbing his nose at the media and TV networks, incendiary language, short-term relationships, will quickly rationalize why a relationship won't work, intolerant of others' differences. Venus in Aries square Jupiter in Cancer, lacking a close relationship with mother. She was more concerned with her own career. Being against the Russians. When Bobby discovered that he wasn't going to play any formal games, he went into a not-so-silent rage, saying he was fed up with these Russian pigs, which angered the Soviets who saw Fischer as their honored guest. This is when he went to Russia. He was only like maybe 17 at the time. And he was mad because they wouldn't let him compete. Setting himself against his race / ethnicity, being accused of anti-Semitism, wild imagination impedes upon his ability to form healthy relationships. The women he attracts goes against his ideal woman. Challenges with being sociable. Very insular, will go into shell mode, will ghost people. On May 26, 1981, while walking in Pasadena, Fischer was arrested by a police patrolman because he resembled a man who had just committed a robbery in the area. Fischer, who alleged that he was slightly injured during the arrest, said that he was held for 2 days, subjected to assault and various types of mistreatment. Fischer published a 14-page pamphlet detailing his allegations of police misconduct, saying that his arrest had been a frame-up and a setup. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. Now, this square can be a case of mistaken identity, with Jupiter being intercepted in the 12th house and Venus being in the 10th. That's the authorities. Mercury in Aquarius, sesqui square Jupiter in Cancer. His feelings sometimes overrides his logic, i.e., you are not supposed to call certain groups of people out without suffering the consequences. But he might have knew that and just didn't give a fuck because his Mercury is conjoined to his South Node in Aquarius. He got Mars in Aquarius. People like that, they're rebels. They are, they are radical. And, they say things unapologetically. If he doesn't feel like doing something, it is easy for him to back out or refuse doing it. Oh, also that Venus square Jupiter in Cancer deals with the time he was in the church and then where he later broke away from it. His assertion that Russians fixed the game of chess, although Fischer had ended his formal education at age 16, and his Jupiter, he became like chess champion at age 15, and his Jupiter's at the 15th degree of Cancer, so that deals with that. But here it says, although Fischer had ended his formal education at age 16, dropping out of Erasmus High School in Brooklyn, he subsequently taught himself several foreign languages so he could read foreign chess periodicals. When Fischer was 16, his mother moved out of their apartment to pursue medical training. Her friend Joan Rocker, who had met Regina when the two were idealistic communists living in Moscow in the 1930s, believes that Fischer resented his mother for being mostly absent, a communist activist and an admirer of the Soviet Union, and that this led to his hatred for the Soviets. In letters to Rocker, Fischer's mother stated her desire to pursue her own obsession of training in medicine and wrote that her son would have to live in their Brooklyn apartment without her. It sounds terrible to leave a 16-year-old to his own devices, but he is probably happier that way. So Venus square Jupiter, Mercury in Aquarius, sesqui square Jupiter, and also, Moon square Mars. Like, he got a lot of aspects dealing with issues with his mother and his mother not being there for him a lot of times. Mercury in Aquarius, semi-square Venus in Aries, saying things that ruffle people's feathers. Radical viewpoints can result in loss of money. The challenges his opponents face with playing with him. In 1981, Fischer stayed at the home of Grandmaster Peter Biasas in San Francisco, where over a period of 4 months, he defeated Biasas 17 times in a series of speed games. In an interview with Sports Illustrated reporter William Knack, Biasas assessed Fischer's play. He was too good. There was no use in playing him. It wasn't interesting. I was getting beaten, and it wasn't clear to me why. It wasn't like I had made a mistake or that mistake. It was like I was being gradually outplayed from the start. He wasn't taking any time to think. The most depressing thing about it is that I wasn't even getting out of the middle game to an end game. I don't ever remember an end game. He honestly believes that there is no one for him to play, no one worthy of him. I played him, and I can attest to that. Uranus and Gemini, semi-square Jupiter and Cancer. This can produce insensitivity, being separated from his mother due to her pursuit of a medical degree, disparaging remarks against race, ethnicity, Russians, Jews, could leave friends hanging, challenges with forming close relationships with women, never married, dated a fellow chess player, Petra, briefly. Now, he did have a common law wife, this Japanese chick, later on. Says in 1988 to 1990, Fischer had a relationship with German chess player Petra Stadler, who had been in touch with Fischer by Spassky. When Stadler later published a book about the affair, Spassky apologized to Fischer. And again, I believe that's the woman that I think set him up, and maybe that's why Spassky apologized. Pluto is opposing the asteroid Amor in his chart. This could deal with a subversive lover. So again, it could be that chick that might have set him up. Ascendant contra parallel Apollo, being extremely stubborn. Mars conjunct Estrella, ascendant opposition Estrella, taking things too far, including the game of chess. That can also deal with where he didn't come back to the States after the Yugoslavia incident. Jupiter contra parallel Cupido, the woman who brought him out of obscurity. But it can also be that other woman who claimed to be the mother of his child. More about that in a minute. Moon conjunct Eros, the publicizing of his affair with Petra. North Node and Chiron conjunct Eurydice. A lover gets him to compete again. Black Moon contra parallel Hera. This could be revenge plots, being hated. And again, it makes me think that that one woman, Petra, was sent to him to set him up. Mars opposition Hygeia. He did have kidney disease, and Mars is in the 7th house. Friend's wife looked after him during his terminal illness, and Mars is in Aquarius. Aquarius rules friends. Midheaven parallel Orpheus. Not really sure what that. Matter of fact, I think that deals with the time he was given asylum in Iceland. Uranus parallel Sisyphus, going over plays over and over again. Fischer played thousands of blitz and offhand games with Collins and other strong players, studied the books in Collins' large chess library, and ate almost as many dinners at Collins' home as his own. Pluto conjunct Terpsichore. He could be scanning the body language of his opponents and his own body movements. Pluto parallel Urania, acquiring specialized knowledge that makes him a fierce competitor. Now this aspect right here, his Black Moon Lilith is opposing the asteroid Niobe. So when I was looking at this, I was like, oh, that deals with a child. But I was like, I don't remember hearing them say he had a child. Well, then I stumbled upon this information. Says Marilyn Young claimed that Jinky was Fischer's daughter, citing as evidence Jinky's birth and baptismal certificates, photographs, a transaction record dated December 4th, 2007, of a bank remittance by Fischer to Jinky and Jinky's DNA through her blood samples. However, Magnus Skolison, a friend of Fischer, said that he was certain that Fischer was not the girl's father. In addition, the validity of Miyoko Watai's marriage to Fischer was challenged. That's the Japanese chick that he had the common law marriage with. On June 16, 2010, Iceland's Supreme Court ruled in favor of a petition on behalf of Jinky Young to have Fischer's remains exhumed. The exhumation was performed on July 5th, 2010, in the presence of a doctor, a priest, and other officials. A DNA sample was taken, and Fischer's body was then reburied. On August 17, 2010, it was announced that the results of the DNA testing had ruled out Fischer as the father of Jinky Young. That Mars opposition Pluto and Ascendant is dealing with that as well. Mainly Mars opposition Pluto with the DNA test and how they basically dug them up. On March 3rd, 2011, an Icelandic district court ruled that Miyoko Watai and Fischer had married on September 6, 2004, and that as Fischer's widow and her heir, Watai was therefore entitled to inherit Fischer's estate. Fischer's nephews were ordered to pay Watai's legal costs amounting to 6.6 million Iceland dollars, approximately 57,000. Uranus is conjoined to Merfak. This can deal with events affecting large numbers of people, especially due to meteorological phenomena. Bold adventurous, somewhat dishonest. South Node parallel Zarak. Melancholy, fear of death, and suicidal tendencies. Pluto parallel Alcyone. Accidents, blindness, violence, homosexuality, feminine power. Sun parallel Yed posterior. Evil influence, the man of death, wasteful, unseen, dangerous, poisoning. Now, I don't think he had a homosexual bone in his body, but maybe some gay men had approached him. Jupiter conjunct Canopus. Voyager, I think he was more asexual than anything. And that Mercury conjunct South Node in Aquarius in the 8th house could point to that, where he was so, rational and he was all up in his head that he really probably didn't have much of a sex drive. Like, I'm sure he had, sexual encounters and, he did marry that woman and all that type of stuff. But I just don't think he was very sexual. And Aquarius in the 8th can manifest as a lack of a sex drive or just being asexual. Now, we know he wasn't asexual, but I'm thinking he didn't have much of a sex drive. Jupiter conjunct Canopus, voyages, journeys, creativity, scandal, violence, great glory, fame, wealth, changes evil to good. Some parallel Persepi that produces inner drive, reclusiveness, blindness, murder, tragedy, fires, homosexuality shows up again, violent death. Now, this is Saturn involved. Maybe his father was homosexual. And let me see the other one. Okay. Changes evil to good, great glory, fame, wealth, scandal, violence. South Node conjunct Sador, words of command, gathering of wealth, a hidden god, love of water, swimming, the arts, communication with birds, aviation. North Node conjunct Subra, strength, plunder, swagger, yet simple and without guile. Chiron parallel Tabit, strong, dignified, self-confidence, inconstancy, definitely had that. Arrogance, he was definitely arrogant. Violence, impiety, prosperity, and trade, and by voyages or abroad, danger of treachery and poison. And I believe that chick, she was the treacherous one. And Chiron's in Leo, and that can deal with a treacherous lover when it's, an aspect with Tabit like that. Venus parallel Procyon, wealth, fame, good fortune, sharp mind, willpower, stubbornness, violence, sudden success, then disaster, occult, politics, dissipation, death by drowning, love of dogs, and dog bites. Mars conjunct Sham, combative, opinionated, jealousy, danger of death in battle. Mars conjunct Albiero, contemplative, culture, artistic, congenial appearance and disposition. Mars conjunct Tarazed, spoil and plunder, imagination, strong passions, will, clairvoyance, fame, and a powerful mind. Mars conjunct Altair, sudden but ephemeral fortune, impulsiveness, courage, accidents, astrology. I think he would have been very much into astrology if somebody would have showed it to him and showed him his chart and all that. Writing, great imagination, strong passions, indomitable will, a dominating character, clairvoyance, penetrating mind. Mercury is opposing the Arabic part of love. That's his love for the game. And where his love for the game wins out over school, with Mercury ruling school. Says the same year Fischer dropped out of high school when he turned 16, the earliest he could legally do so. He later explained to Ralph Ginsburg, you don't learn anything in school. Venus in mid-heaven opposition Arabic part of plays. In the struggle at the board, this youth, almost still a child, showed himself to be a full-fledged fighter, demonstrating amazing composure, precise calculation, and devilish resourcefulness. I was especially struck not even by his extensive opening knowledge, but his striving everywhere to seek new paths. In Fischer's play, an enormous talent was noticeable, and in addition, one sensed an enormous amount of work on the study of chess. Jupiter opposition Arabic part of discord. His criticism of Jews and denial of Holocaust, his inability to come back to the U.S. after violating UN sanctions against Yugoslavia. Both match locations were at the time part of the same country, the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, which was under UN sports sanctions because of the breakup of Yugoslavia. Fischer's participation led to a conflict with the U.S. government. Again, all of this is in the documentary. Pluto opposition Arabic part of honorable acquaintance, meeting and competing against grand chess masters. Uranus opposition Arabic part of private enemies, being gang stalked, perhaps. Private enemies could be Russians or Jews. He did claim that the Russians could be using some kind of radiation method to thwart his attempts to win. So speculation on psychological condition real quick. One person stated, while as far as is known, Fischer was never formally diagnosed, there have been widespread comment and speculation concerning his psychological condition. Based on his extreme views and unusual behavior, Reuben Fine, psychologist and chess player who met Fischer many times, said that some of Bobby's behavior is so strange, unpredictable, odd, and bizarre that even his most ardent apologists have had a hard time explaining what makes him tick, and described him as a troubled human being with obvious personal problems. Valery Krylov, advisor to Anatoly Karpov and a specialist in the psychophysiological rehabilitation of sportsmen, believe Fischer had schizophrenia. Psychologist Joseph G. Ponteroto from secondhand sources concludes that Bobby did not meet all the necessary criteria to reach a diagnosis of schizophrenia or Asperger's syndrome. The evidence is stronger for paranoid personality disorder. Magnus Skolason, a chess player, psychiatrist, and head doctor of Saab Institution for Mentally Ill Offenders, near self-loss, befriended Fischer towards the end of Fischer's life. From Endgame, Fischer's 2011 biography by Frank Brady. Skolason was not Bobby's psychiatrist, as has been implied in the general press, nor did he offer Bobby any analysis or psychotherapy. He was at Bobby's bedside as a friend to try to do anything he could for him. Because of his training, however, he couldn't fail to take note of Bobby's mental condition. He definitely was not schizophrenic, Skolason said. He had problems, possibly certain childhood traumas that had affected him. He was misunderstood. Underneath, I think he was a caring, sensitive person. And I believe so too. And that is the story and chart of Bobby Fischer. Let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed it. And I am out. Stay tuned for the next face reading.